On Memorial Day 2022, a large commemoration was held to dedicate a new monument at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Pittsburgh. The building was originally erected as a meeting hall for the Grand Army of the Republic, but has become the largest memorial hall for any military personnel in the United States. While on location, we took time to explore the vast collection of military artifacts on display.
So we're inside a little exhibit here about Rally Around the Flags. So this is different flags from various military events around American history. Of course, what interests me is primarily the Civil War stuff, but there's some other cool stuff in here. For example, this 5th Corps flag actually would have been flown at both the battles at Gettysburg and Spotsylvania Courthouse, and that would have been by Colonel Bowman Schweitzer. The flag is riddled bullets to show, from the various battles involved. And over here, what's really cool, we actually got a signal flag that was used by Luther Calvin First of the 10th Pennsylvania Reserve, and he operated the signal flags on top of little and big round tops during the Battle of Gettysburg. And he actually leaves a pretty interesting account that he had to run up and down from the hilltops down to Cemetery Ridge and back and forth, delivering orders to Meade, Sedgwick, Birney, Warren, all the key commanding officers on the battlefield that day. And there's even, you can see, a handwritten note from First telling you the events this flag was involved with. This beat-up rag, it looks like a rag, is actually the remains of the 102nd Pennsylvania Regimental flag. The reason it's so beat up is trying to avoid it from being captured. The 102nd Pennsylvania stuck a rock to this flag and sunk it into the Rappahannock River, and this is what remains.
Soldiers and Sailors boasts a colorful array of drums brought back from battlefields of the 1860s. This particular drum was manufactured in Boston, but wound up in the hands of a Confederate drummer at the start of the war. During a Union assault on entrenchments at Spotsylvania Courthouse, the 61st Pennsylvania briefly overran Confederate lines. This drum was captured by Robert Y. Thompson of Company E in the chaos. Thompson gradually decked out the drum in decorations symbolizing the 6th Corps, including marking the date of capture.
If you look there closely in the case, that metal-looking item is actually a wooden cane, a rosewood cane. And it was made from wood that was in furniture in the Marshall House of Washington, D.C. The reason this place is so important is that in May of 1861, Elmer Ellsworth of the New York Fire Zouaves became the first Union casualty of the war. When he tried to take down the Confederate flag, the innkeeper had raised the Confederate flag over the hotel. Ellsworth stormed inside the home and tried to retrieve it, and a resulting scuffle led to the death of Ellsworth. But that cane actually comes from that room, comes from that hotel.
Something very surprising to see on display is this collection of artifacts pertaining to General Gouverneur K. Warren. Warren commanded the 5th Corps at the Battle of Gettysburg and has often been credited for helping to deem Little Round Top on the Southern Union flank of significant importance to winning the battle. Warren's sword, a telescope that was used by his staff, and one of the spurs of the general are now on display at the museum. This bullet-scarred log was cut from a tree standing on the Chickamauga battlefield in Georgia. This hat was mangled from seeing heavy action in such engagements like the Battle of the Crater. It was owned by Captain James McFeeters of the 100th Pennsylvania, nicknamed the Roundheads. He also carried this haversack with him into battle.
John Hall from Portland, Maine came up with a breech-loading flintlock rifle, which you can see right here, with this very unique trigger mechanism, and that was allowed for breech-loading action. There were some modifications made to it around the time of the American Civil War, and they made it into percussion cap. Due to the fact that the gases would leak from the breech when fired, the rifles had to be altered several times, and as far as I'm aware, not many of them were used long in the actual Civil War. However, there was a Hall's Rifle Works in Harpers Ferry, what is now Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, producing these very precious breech-loading rifles, and that was one of the targets of John Brown's raid in 1859.
This relic represents the inclusion from post-Civil War conflicts. This was the bronze prow of the USS Pennsylvania, an armored cruiser during the early 20th century that witnessed the first successful landing of an airplane on a warship.
Now, there's a lot of cool stuff here involving the First World War, but what interests me most is this little guy down here. This is an aiming circle made in 1918, and this was allowed to accurately aim artillery and to draw up combat zone maps. And what you're looking at here are some of the remains of a mess kit that belonged to Corporal David Foster, who was from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, one of the 1,087 Marine casualties during the First World War. These items were recovered in the vicinity that he was killed in on June 12, 1918. During the fighting, which was in the Bella Wood, he ended up being killed as a result. In Bella Wood, a lot of people ignored the First World War. That's something, even though the United States was only involved for a year, there's very few other conflicts that occurred as much casualties as the First World War. His final resting place is in the Dravensburg, Pennsylvania, Richland Cemetery. So the family were able to get some of his mess kit and make the shadow box to remember him by.
The First World War gave rise to the military unit forever synonymous with Pennsylvania, the 28th Division, nicknamed the Bloody Bucket for those unfamiliar with the Keystone iconography of the state on the shoulder.
So this helmet was recovered by Carson Stauffer. It's a British helmet that he found on the beaches during D-Day. Stauffer was part of one of the landing forces over there. So he recovered this lost British helmet, and right over here is actually Stauffer's actual helmet from D-Day. So this very rusty relic was found in Vietnam in 1996 and found near the site of the fire paste ripcord in, if I'm pronouncing it out, the Show Valley, S-H-A-U, the Show Valley, where in 1970 a counteroffensive had been launched by against the United States, who were occupying certain positions. Gary Radford, 101st Airborne, was the only veteran of the battle to return to communist Vietnam in 1996 as part of a POW team searching for remains of American soldiers lost in combat. Gary's instrumental pointing out the exact locations where he last saw two men in his company before evacuating the site. Although the two men were not found, this M60 machine gun and helmet were located in the vicinity those two men were lost.
This uniform and boots were worn by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Dudding during the beginnings of the Iraq War. With a background in chemical engineering, Dudding was brought in to advise the coalition forces on how to handle the burning oil fields left in the wake of Iraqi forces retreating. He was able to cut off Iraq's oil flow to Syria with wrenches such as the one on display behind his uniform. To commemorate the most recent of Pittsburgh's servicemen and women, plans were made to erect a memorial to the War on Terror outside of the Memorial Hall. After much research and planning, the monument was dedicated the day of our visit. It now stands watch over Bigelow Boulevard, joining several other monuments that adorn the building. The halls of soldiers and sailors are packed full of relics from Western Pennsylvania's involvement in the past 150 years of America's military history. If you are ever in the Steel City, be sure to explore the halls for yourself.